The people of Umoja built a wall of rumors to keep her out, claiming her touch could sour the milk and her humming could summon the drought. They saw a woman lost to the shadows, a mad creature who danced with ghosts while the rest of the world slept. But what the village never understood was that the music they mocked was the only rhythm holding their broken world together, and the woman they labeled a witch was the only shield standing between them and a darkness they were too afraid to name. We enter the world of Amara Bola, a woman who has become a ghost while still drawing breath. Her goal is the ultimate act of quiet preservation, keeping the ancient healing songs of her bloodline alive, even if it means singing them to empty walls. Her deep flaw is a soul-crushing resignation. She has worn the mask of madness for so long to protect her heart from further pain that she has almost forgotten the sound of her own true voice. She is a healer who has lost her patient, a mother who has lost her child, and a protector who has lost her people. Now, she waits for a single act of courage from a stranger, a witness brave enough to see the woman behind the crazy, before her light, and the secrets of her ancestors, vanish into the red dust of Umoja forever. Amara's world was bound by the tattered hem of her mismatched wrappers and the uneven rhythm of a walk that seemed to apologize to the earth itself. She moved through the market like a ripple in a stagnant pond, a patchwork ghost in a blouse of faded indigo and a headscarf of sun-bleached ochre that belonged to a different decade. Her mud house sat on the extreme fringe of Umoja, a solitary structure leaning away from the village as if it, too, felt the weight of the communal glare. Inside, the air tasted of dry herbs and old cedar, the walls smoothed by hands that had long ago ceased to touch other humans. Every morning, she swept the dirt in front of her door with a focus so intense it bordered unholy. To the villagers passing by, it was the repetitive tick of a broken mind, but to Amara, it was a ceremony of order in a life that had been shattered. She ignored the stones thrown by the boys and the sharp, fearful whispers of the women. She had lived in this exile so long that the silence of her home had become her only true companion, a hollow space where the echoes of her ancestors' songs could breathe without being choked by the dust of judgment. At the center of the village, under the shade of the great Iroko tree, Madame Abaktiti adjusted her heavy gold jewelry, her voice cutting through the humid afternoon like a blade. "Do not let your kindness blind you," she warned a circle of younger wives, her eyes darting toward the outskirts. "That woman carries a rod that does not show on the skin." She leaned in, recounting the tale of a young girl who had once mocked Amara's dancing. By sunset, the girl's leg had snapped like a dry twig in a quiet kitchen. Abike didn't mention the slippery floor or the girl's own haste. In Umoja, a coincidence was merely a hidden curse. "She laughs at the air because the spirits are telling her secrets about us," Abike whispered, painting a portrait of a predator in tattered lace. The fear she sowed was a living thing, rooting itself in the hearts of mothers who began to pull their children closer whenever a distant, melodic hum floated on the wind. It is easy to hate what we have decided to fear, and as the stories grew taller, the woman in the mud house grew smaller, disappearing behind a thicket of lies. Perhaps you have seen how a single rumor can bury the truth under a mountain of shadows, making us forget to look for the person beneath the pain. If you feel the weight of Amara's isolation, stay with her as she walks this lonely path. Your presence here is the first crack in the wall the village built. Zora did not believe in curses, she only believed in what her eyes saw, and she saw a woman who looked like a tree that had survived the fire. One afternoon, chasing a runaway ball, the young girl found herself at the cracked window of the mud house. Instead of a cauldron or bones, she saw Amara sitting before a small, fractured mirror, touching her own reflection with a tenderness that made Zora's throat ache. Amara let out a laugh, not the jagged shriek of a madwoman, but a soft, warm sound that bubbled like a hidden spring. It was the sound of a woman remembering a joke told by someone who was no longer there. Zora stepped on a dry leaf, and the sound vanished. Amara turned, her eyes wide and shining, not with malice, but with a terrifying, raw vulnerability. For a heartbeat, the witch and the child shared the same air, and in that silence, the rumors of Umoja began to wither. Zora didn't run. She realized that the woman the village feared was simply a woman who had been forgotten by everyone but herself. "You have a stubborn heart, little goat," Amara murmured, her voice like the rustle of dry grass as she finally allowed Zora inside. The room was a museum of survival, filled with dried roots and clay pots that smelled of earth and rain. That day, the lessons began, not in magic, but in the architecture of memory. Amara began to sing, a low, vibrating melody that seemed to pull the heat out of the afternoon. It was a song of the bloodline, a map of roots and healing that had been passed down through generations of women who knew how to talk to the fever. "This is not madness," Amara whispered, guiding Zora's small hands over a bundle of bitter leaf. "This is the weight of knowing how to fix what is broken when the world only wants to throw it away." As she taught Zora the verses, the resignation in Amara's eyes flickered into something sharper, a desperate hope that her life's work would not die with her. She was passing the torch in the dark, weaving her survival into the heart of a child who was brave enough to listen to the music instead of the noise. The fragile piece of the mud house was shattered when Zora's mother, eyes wide with terror, burst through the door and snatched her daughter from the stool. "Witch! You have finally lured a soul into your web," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the quiet grove. The news spread through Umoja like a bushfire in the dry season. By sunset, a crowd had gathered at the village square, fueled by Madame Abaktiti's triumphant victory. The contamination of a child was the final straw. The fear had finally found its boiling point. The village head was pressured into an ultimatum: Amara Bola was to be banished by dawn. To the people of Umoja, they were amputating a limb to save the body. They did not see the tears Amara shed as she watched from her window, nor did they feel the cold dread of a healer who knew the village was casting away its only protection. When the world turns its back on the very person who would save it, the silence that follows is the loudest sound of all. What would you say to a heart that has given everything only to be told it is not enough? If this moment of injustice moves you, share your thoughts in the comments. Let us bear witness to the truth that Umoja is trying to bury. The wind howled through the eaves of the mud house that night, a mournful sound that mirrored the packing of a life into a single, small bundle. Amara sat on her mat, her movements slow and deliberate. She did not pack gold or fine cloth, she packed the dried seeds of life-saving herbs and the heavy, invisible memories of a husband and child who had once filled this space with laughter. She looked at the cracked mirror one last time, seeing not a madwoman, but a survivor of 1,000 internal storms. Outside, the village was a constellation of angry torches, but inside, there was only the flickering of a single oil lamp. Amara began to hum, a final prayer for the people who were currently sharpening the sticks intended to drive her away. She knew the rhythm of the earth was shifting. She could feel a heaviness in the air that had nothing to do with the wind. That madness was at its peak, but it wasn't hers. It belonged to the village, a collective fever of hate that blinded them to the coming storm. At the first light of dawn, the crunch of gravel beneath 100 feet announced the arrival of the mob. They stood before the leaning mud house, a wall of grim faces and pointed wood. Madame Abaktiti stood at the front, her face a mask of righteous fury. "Come out, Amara. Take your shadows and leave our air to be clean," she cried. The door creaked open, and Amara stepped out. She did not look like a monster, she looked like the earth itself, ancient, weathered, and unmovable. Her eyes were not wild, but terrifyingly calm, a deep well of stillness that made the men with the sticks hesitate. She did not beg, and she did not curse. She simply stood her ground, a lone figure against a sea of prejudice. The stakes were no longer just about a house or a lease, it was a battle for the soul of Umoja. If Amara fell, the truth fell with her, and the village would be left truly alone in the dark. The tension was broken by a scream that came not from the mob, but from the center of the village. A woman came running, her clothes torn, carrying a small boy whose body was arched in a rigid, terrifying spasm. The fever. It has taken him. No root is working, no prayer is heard. The crowd froze. The boy's skin was the color of ash, his eyes rolled back, his breathing a wet, ragged struggle. It was the very plague the elders had whispered about in the old stories. While the sane villagers backed away in a wave of instinctive terror, fearing the touch of death, Amara moved. She didn't ask permission. She walked through the parting crowd like a blade through silk. She took the boy from his mother's trembling arms and knelt right there in the red dust of the square. The villagers watched, breathless, as the woman they had called a witch began to walk, her hands moving with a precision that was surgical, her voice rising in a low, guttural chant that seemed to command the very blood in the boy's veins to settle. "Be still." Amara's voice suddenly boomed, a sound so powerful it silenced the wind itself. As she walked, she looked up at the circle of accusers, her eyes burning with the fire of 20 years of suppressed truth. "You called me mad because I danced to keep the grief from drowning me. You called me a witch because I knew the secrets of the leaves that you were too lazy to learn. I am Amara Bola, daughter of the healers you once revered, and the only reason your children have lived this long is because I prayed for you while you threw stones at my head. She revealed her past in a roar of heartbreak, the loss of her own child to this very fever, and the vow she had made to never let another mother fill that void. She explained how her madness was the only way to carry the weight of her survival. The boy in her arms let out a long, shuddering breath, his body relaxing as the fever broke under the force of her will and her herbs. As his eyes opened and he whispered a single, weak word of life, the torches in the square were lowered. The silence that followed was not one of fear, but of a profound, shattering shame. We are standing at the edge of a great transformation, where the darkness is finally meeting the light. Before we see the final sunrise of Umoja, take a moment to honor the resilience of the unheard. Your support of this story ensures their voices are never truly lost again. The mud house was never rebuilt. Instead, the village built a clinic of stone and cedar at its center, with Amara Bola's name carved above the door. Umoja became a place of music again, but this time, the songs were shared. The mad woman was gone, replaced by the mother of healing, a woman who no longer walked the outskirts but sat at the head of the elders' council. Zora stood by her side, the first of many students learning that a broken heart can be the most powerful tool for healing others. Every year, they held a festival where the villagers danced, not to drive away spirits, but to celebrate the courage it takes to look past a rumor. Madam Abaktiti was not banished, she was made to sit in the front row and listen to the songs of the woman she had tried to destroy, a living reminder that justice is not always a hammer, but sometimes a mirror. As the sun set over a transformed Umoja, Amara finally closed her cracked mirror and looked out at a world that finally saw her, not as a ghost, but as the very heart of the village.